happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
So I was just talking to you before the show.
Before the show started.
Before the show.
Yes.
Is the last 2 weeks have been extremely busy for me. All of our schedules are different, but I've had a lot of things just metaphorically cross my desk over the last couple of weeks. And it's been really busy. Just barely enough time to kind of take a breath and really move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Put something on the back burner, knowing I have to come back to it. You know, like that kind of, well, like started with that, but I have to put it away now because I'm moving on to this thing. But I got to come back to that thing. Oh, but then this thing came up. Like it's been like that for like 2 weeks now. And there is no problem with me falling asleep at the end of the day.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
'Cause
Doesn't keep me
some
up.
people are not that lucky.
No,
but,
no, that
which
it
is
wires
an
them up,
interesting
and then
thing.
they're like thinking about these things.
Yeah, but I mean, it's nice that at least you have a moment where you can actually let it go.
Right.
Yeah.
So, few things. Just this past weekend, we had the choir from Pacific Lutheran University. My niece
Yes, we did. Yep.
was with us, and I hadn't
I'm
seen.
glad you got to worship too. That was
She did. She came to
great.
9:30, and I asked her to come to that one because she was in town. Because since she sings in a choir, I wanted her to hear our choir.
And it kind of worked with her schedule too. She didn't have to, when she got
Rush.
there, she didn't have to like worry about rushing back and then.
No, and then she ended up going to lunch with Rachel and Carl and
Yeah,
Max.
so it does leave a
and-
little bit of time for lunch.
Yep.
And it's a service that worked out in a lot of ways.
But I hadn't seen my niece since high school.
Wow.
Because even when we were, when we were living in the same state, which would have been prior to 2015. So part of when she was in high school, I was in California, she was in Illinois. And then
You don't get a lot of holidays off to go back to
No.
wherever she's going to be for
no,
Christmas.
and
yeah.
then if I'm visiting, it may not line up where I would be able to see her. And so I was just realized I hadn't seen her since high school. Now we're friends on Facebook, and occasionally we text. I mean, it's not like we're not in contact, but it's just actually face to face, right? In 6-7 years, So
Yeah.
so it was nice to catch up with her. Then but the day before Saturday, we had a conference meeting. So all the churches, ELCA Lutheran churches in Las Vegas, St. George, Kingman, Bullhead City, and is Havasu in our conference?
Havasu's in our
Yeah.
conference, yeah.
So once a year we do a conference meeting with the synod staff. So our bishop, assistant, so on and so forth. So on Saturday morning, we were meeting with the synod staff and the rest of our conference and got to kind of hear what's going on in the synod and what's going on in with our colleagues too.
Yeah, so that was always. I mean, it's always important to stay connected with what's going on
What's
there,
going
but
on.
especially when you have the bishop and synod staff in town, and
That's right.
Yeah, get everybody connected.
And because whenever the synod staff's in town, because they're in Phoenix, they always want to make sure that everybody, like all the pastors, get together, talk, that sort of thing. So one of the synod staff members who does the Generosity Project, works on stewardship, wanted to get together because we'd never talked. And so, somebody's leaving the studio. I think I'm boring them. Is that what that is? It's just,
No, I think they were going
Just-
to yes.
he's like, I don't want to
Get
hear
their
this.
friends. Yes.
Oh,
this
bring
is-
more people back?
yes.
Okay. It's like, it's not very often you have actual people leave in the midst of a broadcast. I'm like, holy moly. So the stewardship person in the synod office wanted to get together. And I said, the only time I can do that would be on Monday on my day off. So, and then he said, okay. And I was like, oh, right. So,
Sure, Monday worked great
so,
for me.
Yeah, right. So I ended up actually having a work meeting on Monday morning, So that's how busy things are, that like when somebody wanted to get together, I'm like, Monday's the only day I can do this, right? So of course I did.
But yeah, got some time there too.
And then today, I had an ELCA meeting. Oh, good, he's coming back. He was stormed out. I thought it was because I was talking about stewardship, and he came back, so I'm good. Or are you leaving again?
Yeah.
He's leaving again. What can you do?
Yes. It's hard to control a live studio audience.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Live studio audiences storm out occasionally.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the words of Jesus, I'll say to Cole, "Are you going to leave too?" Not yet. He said not yet. Well, Peter didn't go, but
Yeah.
Cole's not yet.
Not
right?
yet.
Um,
Not yet.
So this morning I had a meeting with a subcommittee of the ELCA Church Council and one of the branches of ministry that we do at the national level, and it's something called corporate social responsibility.
Look at
That's
that.
a big name.
Yes, you're in something important when you're.
I'm in deep, folks.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
in deep.
that's
So that branch of ministry falls under the service and justice category or department within the ELCA.
Okay.
And corporate social responsibility, I was asked to sit in on this committee because what they do is they examine all the I wouldn't call them hot button issues, but things that we should be know where we stand on things, including big conversation today on artificial intelligence, AI as they call it, and some applications of AI can do great good. Help streamline things, maybe
Yeah.
even get answers to things quickly in a web search or something.
or like help diagnose different issues in medicine.
That's
you know?
correct. So any number of great applications, but there's always a flip side to that. And so we spent some
It could
time.
end the world.
Yeah, because they were talking about military applications of having AI-controlled what they call autonomous weapons, meaning no person is involved. And I don't mean like a guidance with a radar, and you're like, get that. That's different. This is where a computer is actually making decisions in real time about
Whether to take somebody out.
whether,
Or not.
yeah, essentially to take out an enemy in quotes. And so we had a big discussion and report on this, and part of it was they are less accurate as of now than people-controlled versions of the same thing. And it was an interesting conversation talking about, what is a position outside of, as Christians we say, war is bad, right? Like that's the easy one. But within the nuance is are we sure that that is a good thing when there is collateral damage, a higher amount of collateral damage of innocent folks caught in a war zone caused by autonomous weapons controlled by artificial intelligence
Right.
versus a person behind it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look at that and like kind of dealing with the really earthy questions of like, what can we look at? How do we support? What do we
Right.
do? But then there's also like, you dive into that, there's some real theological questions in there
Yeah,
about
right,
like,
right.
some of these.
And
yeah,
and so
AI
none
technology.
of that is in quotes on me, as I'm sitting on this hearing in a lot of ways, because I also sit on the church council, meaning I'm representing, but there's like ethicists and people who this is their full-time job,
Yeah.
and so what they're doing is they're presenting in a manner so that they can have these discussions, and including writing position papers that will eventually get published that deal with pros, cons, what's at stake, all this kind of stuff. And I'm not a permanent member, but I represent the church council at these meetings.
Yeah.
And so I got to essentially also be, I can participate fully, but I'm also kind of a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
I'm not spying or
okay.
anything, but I'm there for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
But really fascinating, and what I found most interesting is, they're tackling things that don't have simple black and white answers or yes no answers. Including AI that's being used by city planners and others, where it essentially can become mass surveillance of everybody. And what's the right to privacy versus public safety? Not black and white issues. There's some gray in there, right? And so
Absolutely.
really fascinating. And there were no final answers today because they're just beginning the dialogue on this very topic. And so they're still saying we got to look at all this and weigh it, and it's not like it's going to come down to this is bad or this is good, but more of a nuanced here are the dangers and here are the positives, like
Yeah.
what they call the SWOT analysis, to be able to see the positives and the negatives and be able to articulate that versus no, bad, don't, or do whatever you want. It's not that
We
simple,
don't live
right?
we don't live in such a black and white
That's right.
world. Yeah, yeah.
So that's the one of the things I did early this morning. Of course, it was a late morning meeting in Chicago at 10 a.m., but for the rest of the world, it was 8 a.m.
Yes.
So I was at my my dining room table this morning with my computer open,
Yeah.
doing that meeting
Going
from
through
home.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of fascinating, but also illustrative of I got a full plate right now, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just looking forward to when I can eat chili this Sunday.
Well, that's coming up.
It
coming
is.
up fast, and that'll be wonderful.
That's right.
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to Chili Cook-Off this weekend. I hope that you can come. I hope that if one of you is a cook out there, you're going to bring some chili.
Yes,
to
please
share.
still bring it. I mean, we still need more chili. So
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. So I'm looking forward to that. And Robbie did confirm today, because Robbie Wingfield is back in town.
yep.
He did confirm that I am going to sing at least one verse of a song this weekend.
I think that's great.
So
I think that's great. So you'll be practicing your music in addition to everything else.
I will not be practicing. I'm going in cold.
Going in cold.
Going in
huh?
cold.
Yes.
I know the song. I can do this. No practice.
Okay.
It's karaoke. You just got to go do it.
Just gotta go do
Yeah, there's no lessons for this. So,
it. Yeah.
how about you? You gonna sing anything?
I have not determined any song.
That's a no, folks. That's a
Yes.
hard no.
It's hard.
Yeah, we know he's not gonna sing. So, I
So
thought I'd ask though.
you can always ask.
Yeah.
Sure. Sure.
Oh, and I have a Hillendale meeting after broadcast today
I
too.
know you do, so
because
that's
your
all right.
wife will be there.
I think she plans on that.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So, full life, and
It is full, but I think there are always lessons to be learned, as we found out in the story of Jesus and the foul-mouthed parrot conversion.
yes.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure one of those parrots must have been named Saul,
Yes.
as he is good at that time of his life, breathing murderous threats against the Lord's disciples.
Breathing proper expletives.
Yes, as
At
opposed
the
to just
Lord's.
normal swear words, right?
Yes, yes.
I'm still trying to do some deep dive and figuring out what's the difference in
I
in
wouldn't
that
dive
story.
too far.
Okay,
It's a-
gotcha. So leave it
dark
alone.
hole,
Leave
yeah.
leave well enough alone.
Yeah.
So yeah, this past weekend, because I love Pastor Brian for this, he's like, we got to get off this subject. We're gonna move and talk about Saul and parrots now. Nice redirection, by the way. As if I wouldn't see through that, but
No, it's what guides me through those difficult times when I think of that story of Jesus.
so if you joined us on Sunday or Saturday, you heard that story of the conversion of Saul of Tarsus, and just reiterating, right, is how do you start a spiritual transformation? Sometimes removing you from your comfortable environment is a place where transformation begins.
Yep, gotta change your environment. Get out
Yep.
of the box.
That's right.
And
if you're
see
in
the world a little differently.
And if you're not willing to do it voluntarily, once in a great while, God will do it for you, because Saul did not want to go on retreat. He did not want to change his environment. He did not want to change his social network. He was very comfortable doing the things that he thought were right.
Yeah.
And so Jesus used that very principle to move him away from his friends and show him a new paradigm, a new model, even a new theology of living. But every so often, all of us need to get away to evaluate and reevaluate our lives, and in a quieter time to connect with God. And so God uses that very principle in Saul of Tarsus, and he becomes, of course, one day Saint Paul, who really changed Christendom in that short span of time between his conversion and his death, where he planted churches, solidified the Christian theology, and made a difference not only in people's lives then, but still impacts us today. So quite something. But one of the things we did this weekend was, as we finished off this sermon series on change, we got to experience a wonderful choir number at 9:30 from a very well-known secular artist. And this arrangement is different than the original recording, but I think that if you were there on Sunday at 9:30, you remember who wrote this. And if you're experiencing this for the first time, listen to it, and we'll tell you all about it when we get back.
That's great when I loved it.
Yep.
Come gather round people wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming, or you'll sink like a stone. For the times, they are a-changing. Your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin, and there's no telling who that is naming. Oh no, for the loser now will be later to win. For the times, they are a-changing.
Come, senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block out the hall. For he who is heard will be he who has stormed. There's a battle outside and it's raging. It'll soon shake your window and rattle your walls. For the times, they are changing.
It's a change of life. I believe it, y'all. From mothers and fathers throughout the land.
Don't criticize what you don't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. your windows and rattle your walls. There's a battle outside, so please heed the call, for the times they are
Bob Dylan.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful.
Yep. I've never heard a choral version of this song.
No.
It had a little gospel feel in it. It was a choral arrangement. We had Tim, Cersei, and Dana Martin leading out on that, and we
Wonderful.
thank
Yeah.
the choir and Keith and Dana and Tim.
All of them just did a fabulous
that.
job with it. Yeah.
And some of you might know this song. It was written in 1963 by Bob Dylan, both poet and at that time really a folk singer. And not much after that, he changed from really folk singer to moving to an electric guitar, and that shook many of his fans up, actually, that he moved from that folk singer style to not, I wouldn't call it rock, but certainly a little bit edgier music. But Bob Dylan really is a poet musician and not just a musician in a lot of ways. And wrote this in 1963, was released in 64, but to understand this song, I mean, things like come gather on people wherever you roam and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone, and if your time to you is worth saving, you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are
Yeah.
a-changin'.
Yeah.
And but written in 63, what was happening in 1963? We were in the midst of civil rights and still extreme violence. William Moore was a retired man from the military, and he was a white man delivering a letter to a governor of a southern state to say should end segregation. He was, and he walked, and he was murdered, shot twice in the head. It was during the time of the sit-ins at lunch counters like Woolworths, and where they were whites only, and when black and white would come together to sit at a lunch counter, violence and chaos would reign in those moments. It was the first time that a president spoke out on civil rights. John F. Kennedy spoke a major speech on civil rights to end segregation and do something about it at the federal level. It was also in the midst of the Cold War between East and West, including in 1963, President Kennedy had visited Berlin, which, if you don't remember your geography, Berlin itself was divided after World War II between East Berlin and West Berlin. And West Berlin was free. It was democratically run.
Okay.
East Berlin was a part communist controlled. But Berlin itself, the city, was surrounded by communist-held East Germany. So there was a small slice of Berlin that was free and democratic, but it was still in East Germany. So that was a very tense thing to have half a city surrounded by communist-controlled, East Germany, and really the Russian Soviet bloc. And President Kennedy had gone there, and he had made this declaration, essentially of the protection of West Berlin, saying, "I am a Berliner. I'm one of you." And so that was a vocal defense of that city, or that half a city. It's also the same year, 1963, the death of Kennedy when he was assassinated in Dallas in November of 63. The Vietnam War is raging. The assassination of civil rights leader Medgar Evers. It was the same year of the March to Washington for Jobs and Freedom, also known as the same place where the I Have a Dream speech occurred,
Yeah.
as well as the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, that killed 5 girls because they were in the wrong place when that bomb went off, and it was a racially motivated bombing to essentially blow up a black Baptist church.
All in 1963.
All in 1963. So it was late in the fall when Bob Dylan wrote these lyrics, this poem, set it to music, and it was released in '64. But he wrote it within the context of 1963, and in that it was really an anthem, as you know, an anthem of change. But he also said some of the influence was Scottish and Irish ballads for this. So, funny enough, and I learned this today, it was released in England, the United Kingdom, in 1965, so even later. It was released on an album, just a general release, in 1964. It was never released as a single in the United States.
Really?
Yeah, see, because back then you'd
Yeah.
release a single, and then that's how it would climb, in quotes, the charts. So it was never released. This song was never released as a single in the United States.
Huh.
In 1965, it was released as a single in England and reached number 9 on their charts, which is separate than the United States. But it was never released as a single in the United States.
Huh.
This is what Bob Dylan says about the song: a self-conscious protest song. It is often viewed as a reflection of the generation gap and the political divide of America in the 1960s. Now, later on, he disputed that and said this. So, another quote: "Those were only the words I could find to separate aliveness from deadness, and it has nothing to do with age." So, in some ways, he reframed the understanding of this song of people who were willing to move forward and those who were not. Aliveness and deadness. And I think that's fair to say, because it's not just a generational thing in terms of societal change. It is really the difference of attitude and mindset, and it really has nothing to do with age, even if a certain subset would identify more here than there or whatever. But it really isn't an age thing. It's a mindset thing.
Yeah.
And thinking about that in the 1960s, which seemed to be very, and was very turbulent for different reasons, we certainly have our issues today, which are also divisive and angry, not unlike the 1960s.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
mean, you hear the vitriol in any sort of public agenda item, whether it's politics, whether it's thinking about caring for the environment, whether it is any number of things. And it is just line in the sand, let's fight, as opposed to let's talk.
Yeah.
So not the same issues. I mean, some are, but at the same time, we have our own lines in the sand and fighting and anger and demonizing and all sorts of things, which is really sad in a lot of ways. So I was thinking about change in general as we've been doing that this last month, and the first place I want to go is situations change, circumstances change, people change,
Absolutely.
but God does not. God is consistent throughout the ages. In the book of Malachi, so last book of the Old Testament, God proclaims through the prophet Malachi, "I, the Lord, do not change." And then the rest of the sentence is, "So you, O descendants of Jacob, are not destroyed." And you say, well, what does that have to do with me? That second half is a reminder of God's consistency, that the descendants of Judah are watched over. And you say, well, okay, well, I'm not a descendant of Judah. let's take this a step further. In the book of Romans, what are we told? We are grafted onto the tree in which Jacob, Isaac, Abraham, we as Christians are grafted onto that same tree. So in a lot of ways, you could also see this for the Christian. I, the Lord, do not change, so you, O descendants of Abraham, we're children of Abraham too, are not destroyed. God lovingly watches over us.
Yeah.
God's agenda does not change in the same way that God does not change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, in the book of Hebrews, just puts it a little bit differently. Author of Hebrews says in chapter 13, verse 8, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a consistency within God, and I think in a lot of ways, Pastor Brian, is that God is in the change business, and when we are changed by Him, we see the world differently. We see it through fresh eyes.
We do. And if we allow that change in, you
Yeah.
know, because you have to break that framework that we have set up in our minds. It's sometimes so rigid. But
That's
to,
right.
To allow that in, to see that change, the
And-
transformation.
And then and in some ways, we can become a third party observer to the change in the world, some for good and some for ill, and be kind of removed from that once we've been changed by God, that we see ourselves as apart from that, because now we're aligning ourselves with someone who has declared they do not change.
Mm-hmm.
That we're moving into a place where the world around us may be changing, but a dedicated, faithful follower of Jesus has been changed by Jesus, but we're not allowing the world to change us in negative ways or to be affected in such ways to give negative responses. And so what I see in all of this is as we become deeper in our faith, yes, we're changed, but we're changed into a timeless reflection of God, which always leads with love. And then you can see things differently from a worldly point of view. And really, St. Paul, and I always, we have this routine of, I'll read the first verse, and then Pastor Brian reads the second verse, and then I finish off. But I saved this second verse, and I put it in the Pastor Brian slot, because it is one that Pastor Brian also likes. You like this verse
Mm-hmm.
because of the
I like a lot of these Bible
but
verses.
because of the Greek word metanoia, he likes this verse. You don't
Yes.
think I remember these things, but I do remember
you
these
do
things.
remember
yes.
these things. Yes. Yes.
So from Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2.
1 and 2. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to the Lord. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. It's a great verse.
Right?
Yeah, it's a great verse.
It's a model for transformational change. Is you have to change the way you think about things. And in a lot of ways, where are you aligning your heart and your mind? And if it's on worldly things, then you're going to get involved in the same way that the world works. You're going to fight with things. You're going to draw lines in the sand. You're going to alienate people and surround yourself by people who agree just like you. Like, all of those things are human constructs. And Paul's like, you really need to transform your mind, change the way you think, because by aligning yourself with God, like the verses we were just talking about, the God who does not change, then in that moment, then guess what? You can be able to see what God's will is. I don't know about you, but that certainly seems to be like an admirable goal. Like, of all the things that I know in this life, maybe having an inkling of what God's will is might be a good thing to acquire. Right?
You might be onto
You
something.
might be onto
there.
something here, right? To acquire the ability to discern God's will and not just react to every situation that comes down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going out on a limb on this, but thinking that might be a good thing.
Yeah.
And I love this, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. So he's not saying human sacrifice, but what he's saying is when you're willing to offer all of yourself in service to God, in service to others, because that's how we serve God, is by serving others. Love God, love your neighbor. Those go together. So as we serve God, whatever you did to the least of these, you did to me. So our act of service to God is always an act of service to someone else. When we are willing to do that, it will affect how we perceive. It will change the way we think. And when we change the way we think because we're engaging in lives of service, then you start to have an awareness of what God's will is, which, as you know, or if you don't, I'm going to tell you, what was Jesus doing all along when he came to earth as God incarnate, God becoming human, but serve humanity. He saved us from ourselves. I mean, he did healing, he did teaching, great, all good stuff. But the ultimate gift to humanity was his death in order that, and as an atonement for our sins, we're our own worst enemies. So the very nature of God is God chose to save us or serve us in a way that we can't even help ourselves. So once again, going back to offer your bodies as living sacrifices in service to God, you're only reflecting the very thing that Jesus did for us.
That's it.
It'll change the way you think.
It does. It's that transforming, looking
right.
at the world differently.
That's exactly right. And that's one of our stepping stones of inspired growth in church is service. It's not the only one, but it certainly is one of them. And if you're on the stepping stone of service because that's something you're natural at, it will actually drive you towards the other ones too, to learn more about this God who gave himself to us. It will lead you to a life of generosity. It will lead you to greater devotion and worship and even how we treat others. And you can say that about any of these inspired growth pieces, is that they should lead you to connect to the other ones too, eventually as you grow, right?
Yeah.
And so this is this understanding of, okay, if God doesn't change, how do I get there? And we heard that one of the pieces is in transformation is maybe you got to move yourself to a new environment to do that. That allows this to happen. I think we're onto something.
I think we're onto
Yep.
something there.
But within all of this verse I'm going to read to you from 2 Corinthians is also not meant to be a downer, but a perspective check for us. Sometimes we need a perspective check in life because when we get so focused on one thing and that thing isn't really a good thing, we get hyper-focused on negativity and I can't believe this is happening and I don't like this. And this verse is meant to give us perspective, not meant to be a downer. So listen to this. Paul writes, he says, for our light, meaning our life, and momentary troubles are achieving us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all, far outweighs the troubles that we have. Listen to this. So we fix our eyes on not what is seen, but what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, and what is unseen is eternal. So sometimes we need a perspective check, and that is not to minimize your troubles. It's not to
No,
minimize
don't
your
hear
pain,
that.
your
Right.
suffering, your uninvited change into your life. It's not to say, guess quit, belly. It's not that. But it's also this reminder, like, the best is yet to come.
Yes. And even today, like it said, we talk about that reminder of like, in 10 years, this burden that's so heavy on us, is that the major takeaway? Is that the biggest thing? And like,
Right. Will that
and
still be the biggest thing 10 years from now?
yeah, and not to take away the it
Suffering
is
in this
causing
moment.
pain or suffering or
Yeah.
whatever that might be, but how greater even when you talk about eternity.
Yeah.
Like,
It doesn't compare.
that's not what rules your life. That's not what defines you. Yeah.
These momentary things that in the moment they seem like they're everything. They even at times feel like life ending or transformative in a negative way. But this reminder is something greater is ahead. And when we get bogged down and hyper focused, it's time to look up and focus on something that will have a bigger significance in your life, because we know that eternity is forever. And that's where we're going to spend. Our life is this long, and eternity, there is no end. And so the perspective is, what are we getting ready for? And even in the trials and the pain, those can, if we're willing to be open, help grow us and to get us ready for what's out there for us, that eternity. That's true. And so the times there are changing, and I wouldn't be surprised if that is a constant in our world. I don't think there is a time where things aren't changing, and maybe even more so in the 20th and 21st centuries.
Yeah.
And so what do we want to attach ourselves to, but the one that does not change? I think that's where we need to be.
Amen.
So with that, we hope you have a great rest of your day. We love you. Take care of yourselves. And we would love to send you out with Philip music, but he is...
I don't think he'll make it back in time.
No, he's in Mississippi
Yes.
right now. He's visiting family during the week. He'll be back this weekend, but he's visiting family this week, and we hope that he is resting, that he finds some serenity, and that he enjoys connecting with his family. So with that, we love you. Take care. God bless you, and we'll see you on Thursday.
Sounds great.